Greetings, I'm Solidus-Skully, and welcome back to Ratchet Deadlocked, and what you saw just there was something exclusive to the Japanese version of Ratchet Deadlocked, where he actually has this very anime-esque transformation sequence into his battle armor. I mean, there is a similar sequence as you progressively gain more Dreadzone armors throughout the game, but I'm kinda certain they didn't keep that, well, at least the Japanese-specific one, for the rest of the game, because it is quite a cool transformation. But, sadly, no dice. Anyway, on to more pressing matters. We're basically going to be finishing off Shellshock for the last time. We're finally in the cathedral, but of course, to pad the boss fight out a little bit longer, yeah, he's basically going to be doing his little runaway act until we whittle down his health for good. And, yeah, if I could say anything about this section of Chronos, it's probably the most padded segment of the game, I'd say, and also a rather unusual position to put Shellshock in and of himself, because most other exterminators we usually fight during the specific tournaments. Like, I mean, the tournament we're about to do next is, I believe it's the Avenger tournament? Or might it be the... whatever. The point is that we usually fight exterminators, you know, on the Dreadzone station, specifically, whereas here we fight Shellshock, and, I don't know whether that's, you know, more to do with the in-story reason of the fact that they don't really consider Shellshock to be that good of an exterminator, or possibly just cutting the game by the seams and having a very padded level to house a boss fight, because, again, we never fight any other boss on specific worlds, nor do we even really hear of them that much, so... yeah, Shellshock, at least in this case, comes across as a bit of an odd one out, and really, I don't think his enemy dynamics really warrant having a multi-phase boss fight, because a lot of the attacks he's doing here is no different than when you first met the guy, so really it's just kind of pissing in the wind. I mean, I suppose, you know, him having very repetitive attack patterns might be the point, you know, being all brawn and no brains, but at the same time though, it's, I feel like if you're gonna have a multi-phase boss, you gotta change up how they react and what sort of attacks they have, if you're gonna fight them again and again, because otherwise you're just doing functionally the same thing, but more. And again, it's not really speaking highly of your game if you can't vary it up, even if slightly, to justify, you know, progressing throughout the level. But then again, that's neither here nor there in this case. I mean, it's not terrible, but it is what it is, really. More ammo for me, and of course we get the sniper rifle, which I suppose I could talk about the weapons. As I probably mentioned beforehand, but I've forgotten, no doubt that due to that being so many whiskey sours ago, my brain has turned to mush. Yeah, weapons are very functional, but at the same time also very powerful to use. Dual Vipers being one of my favorites. The Scorpion Flail is a weapon that we'll be getting later that I sort of mistook the Magma Cannon for being. But yeah, I mean, you do get a few unique ones, again, like the Mini Turret Gun from Ratchet 2 makes a return. The Scorpion Flail is basically... well, it's kind of akin to the Plasma Whip by way of the Walloper, in that, again, it does have an ammo count, but it does have powerful shockwave attacks. And, yeah, the Sniper Rifle, basically being your Pulse and Flux Rifle sort of deal, is pretty sweet, so no real complaints there. Oh, come on, Shellshock, you've only got a slither of health, and if you were truly the Arnold Schwarzenegger badass you claim to be, then you would fight us like a wee little girly man. Whatevers. Whoopee. Excitement. Yeah, another thing to also mention. I don't know whether this is the fact that they were just sort of slowly refining the controls just to, you know, I guess maybe get things ready for Tools of Destruction, but yeah, Ratchet can now run and throw his wrench. Well, sort of, actually. He can run and throw his wrench, but it's sort of like a brief pause in between, so... I don't know, I guess a slightly less sluggish slowing down to do a thing that you've been able to do before? I don't know. I guess the point is that they were slowly refining the engine for Tools of Destruction, although I suppose that is also a bit of an interesting thing that I can talk about, albeit very briefly, although I don't know if I should expunge this now, or when there's just a boring segment of the game, since we are coming close to finishing off, you know, Shellshock. Yeah, you know what, I think I might save it for a bit later. We're nearly done with Shellshock here, and he's just terminating with extreme prejudice. Shockwave, missile attack. That's really about it. He's... again, I know it's the first boss, but Shellshock also isn't really very interesting. Which, I mean, I guess might reflect in how, you know, low of an opinion characters like Ace Hardlight or Gleeman Vox have on him, but... still, I mean, it's just not very interesting to talk about, but at least now he's not running away anymore, so we can finally just sort of finish him off. And also, despite being the bomb weapon, the B6 Obliterator is, a weapon that gets a little bit more useless as time goes on. So, yeah. Second only to the cufflink one from Secret Agent Clank. Oh, thank bloody goodness, it's over. We did it! We got a medal! And charged boots! Whoopee. And now we can unlock the Avenger Tournament.
Look at those idiots cheering! 6 million bolts of hardware down the drain, and those ingrates are celebrating like I won the freaking lottery! Remind me why I put up with these morons.
Who else would watch Vox News? Temptation Asteroid? Galaxy's Funniest Decapitations?
Yeah.
Queer Eye for the Tyrannoid?
I get it! Seems we've underestimated our Lumbach's friend.
You got lucky. Shellshock was too slow and too stupid to be an exterminator. He should have been retired years ago.
Well, he's retired now. Ratchet, however... he just may be useful. He's even more popular than you were back in your heroic youth. Come to think of it, he even reminds me of you.
I said he got lucky. His luck won't last forever.
Yeah, I'm a heel, grr. But anyway, that's, yes, where the gears in Gleeman Vox's head start to turn, and he's thinking, oh, yes, yeah, Ratchet, yes, Ace Hardlight replacement. But that's neither here nor there in this case, because while trying to promote Ace Hardlight, it seems indeed that Underdog Ratchet is taking the lead of the people's hearts. In all of our hearts, mayhaps, given the popularity of the Ratchet & Clank series, even to this day, really. I mean, again, I don't think the series has quite the level of relevance it probably did during the PS2 days, but I don't know, like, I mean, even with Rift Apart being the thing that it was, like, it still strikes me as being a bit fucking crazy that the Ratchet series has lasted as long as it has. I mean, I don't know, I mean, while the series has sort of changed tones and shifted gears right after this very game, actually, I don't know, there's something to be said about how much passion Insomniac does legitimately have for the franchise and why they've kept these characters going strong, even despite, you know, having amassed massive success with, you know, the Spider-Man and even the upcoming Wolverine game that they're making. Though I haven't really seen much about it since the announcement trailer, but it's neither here nor there in this case. Guessing that'll probably come out after Spider-Man 2, but remains to be seen, really. Although it does kind of... Well, again, to not focus too much on the Insomniac topics for too long, it does also make me wonder, like, I mean, with the success of, you know, the Spider-Man games, and I guess, depending on how well the Wolverine game does, what exactly does this mean for the Ratchet & Clank series? Because given how much of a moneymaker it was for Sony, to the point where they actively acquired Insomniac after the fact, does this mean the end for Ratchet & Clank, or is the series just gonna periodically stop? I mean... I suppose there is also the topic of the series' longevity, you know, given how far they could actively take the story and characters, you know, without having to go for a full-on reboot like they sort of did in 2016, but then not. I don't know. I mean, I suppose it's possible they could continue with Rivet and Kit, but that would also be, well, contradictory to the name, or I guess kind of create like a bit of a Rayman Raving Rabbit situation where the main character of his own series gets overshadowed by annoying fucking plushy fucko things. I don't know. I suppose we'll see a little bit later. Victory! But yeah, in terms of talking about how the Avenger tournaments work and, well, basically how you progress, yeah, it's pretty much done in a similar vein to the qualification course, where again, you basically go through an arena segment, then a platforming challenge, and just do a bunch of different challenges until you either fight a boss or just get to the end of the stage, as is the case with the Avenger tournament. It's weird, I do think in terms of progression they should have had you maybe fight Shellshock here, but... I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe they might have intended for you to fight certain exterminators on certain planets, because... Oh, and I was just sort of thinking as I was playing through the game like a while ago, that maybe, what was his name again? The Eviscerator would have been best fought on, like, Serathos or something? I don't know, like, I mean, it would have fit given the more naturalistic, you know, insectoid alien that it would have been, but I don't know, that's neither here nor there in this case. But yeah, it's, again, I will say, like, I mean, again, and as you're going to be seeing by the time we finally get to the Tower of Power, the game does gradually expand in scope in terms of what you're doing platforming-wise. I mean, it's very basic, especially given the fact that you don't have Clank. Or wall jumping, I don't think, so, yes, that's one thing that Deadlocked took out of the game, which clearly it makes it the worst game ever, because I hate my audience. I'm being facetious, obviously, but, yeah, add a few more mechanics, take one away, and the balance is skewed, so it is. So I suppose now is the time, if it ever was, to talk about some trivia. Specifically regarding the engine that Ratchet Deadlocked was built on, because this engine that you're seeing for Ratchet Deadlocked was actually built from scratch, as opposed to using the one from Up Your Arsenal. So, what that basically means is that they basically rejigged everything from the beginning, obviously. But again, like, I mean, you can sort of tell with the jump physics and everything being a little bit off compared to Ratchet & Clank 3, like, I mean, it's not quite as fluid as Up Your Arsenal, but at the same time, everything is mechanically responsive and, you know, controls just as well as a Ratchet & Clank game should have. But it's just the slight differences that feel a little bit off compared to, you know, the previous game, which is something that you can only really tell if you played the game for yourself. So, again, just take my words with a grain of salt unless you have experience with both games, but, you know, anyway. I mean, I suppose it is also worth noting, as I've also gotten written down here, that yeah, the game also had a heavier emphasis on multiplayer, which forced the game to be cut down all across the board. And a lot of the reason why that was done was because Insomniac... Oh, I don't think it was Insomniac, no, it was Sony, actually, who wanted a Ratchet & Clank game for a 2005 Christmas release, which makes sense, given how well that Up Your Arsenal sold, and generally how well the Ratchet & Clank games tended to do in an era dominated by Grand Theft Auto 3 and the like. But, yeah, given the development cycle, the fact that they had to change the game from a racing game to this... all within... And again, I think they pretty much forced Insomniac out of their comfort zone, because what they usually tended to have was, like... I believe it was 3 months pre-production and 9 months of, you know, actual development. Which, again, would have accounted for an entire year's development cycle, which, again, was still somewhat feasible by 2005. Yeah, this pretty much put Insomniac's backs up against the wall, and basically, yeah, given the fact that they were also working on Resistance, and I believe very early planning for Tools of Destruction at this stage, yeah, not a fun time. This is a bit more of a cynical thought on my mind, actually, and again, you can probably take this with a grain of salt, but I do have to wonder, actually, if the hellish development cycle, the fact that this game, you know, at the time was considered the bad Ratchet game, I do have to wonder whether or not this was ultimately the factors that contributed to the Ratchet series, maybe not necessarily abandoning, like, a lot of its core identity, but at least, you know, going for the more Pixar-esque tone that it went with in the future games. I mean, again, I say Pixar-esque, you know, as if it's a bad thing, because again, I think it benefited the future trilogy in ways that it didn't for some of the other games. But, I don't know, like, I mean, starting with Tools of Destruction, I believe Insomniac did say that the game created something of like a... What was it called again? It was like a DNA template. Basically, the standard of which every single Ratchet & Clank game going forward should ape from. Which was, again, Tools of Destruction, which, while not a bad game, it's actually quite solid. I do think is probably the most paint-by-numbers Ratchet & Clank game, and that might have been intentional given they wanted it to set the standard, but... At the same time, though, I think if you're looking into the series metrics, like, the most popular games of... Well, the series, I'd say, would probably be Ratchet & Clank 2 or 3. At least up to that stage. I mean, again, barring that, A Crack in Time, which, again, is fucking fantastic. Yeah, but again, I really don't know. I mean, this is really just sort of, you know, speculating about what the future may bring, which, in Ratchet & Clank's case, I'm not really too sure how much of a future it really has left, because, I mean, I think story-wise, I think they've taken the characters as far as they could go. I mean, they could just have random bumblefuck adventures, you know, and keep the series going that way, but I suppose there is also a case of, again, when you have the stakes so high, how much further can you take them? And I mean, even in terms of personal stuff, I think all you really have left to explore is, like, you know, the whole Lombax dimension thing that the future games brought up, but after that, where do you go from there? I mean, I suppose you could shift gears to Rivet and Kit, but, I don't know. I'm guessing, you know, it might spoil the end of Ratchet and Clank. I mean, it is a popular game series, but, you know, I mean, all series have a shelf life, and again, even if they're not doing that whole Mario or Zelda thing of, you know, each game could theoretically be the first one, not all games are created equally, so everything ends, and it's always sad. And now I made myself very depressed, so, yeah, time to lighten up the mood. Honk honk. We've reached the top of the Tower of Power, and, now we gotta survive a bout on top of here, and that's pretty much all she wrote, really. I mean, it's kind of weird, though. I mean, we have big arena energy, could have used it to fight Shellshock, but whatever. On that note, I am Solidus-Skully, keep it new metal, and enjoy this transformation, dudes.